Hello, so very welcome to this overview of the Nordic market for grocery retail. So that's the sale of foods and other things you can find in your normal supermarket that we'll be discussing here today. So the Nordic market is a region within Europe. Consists of 5 countries with 27 million people and a gross domestic product of about 1,500 billion euros. That's about 10% of the total GDP of the European Union, so it's not an insignificant market. It's quite an interesting one, actually. And the GDP per capita also indicates that this is a place where people do have a bit of money to spend on quality goods. What you need to understand, though, is that while these countries have a lot in common, there are language similarities, there are cultural similarities, there are historical bonds, there is all kinds of trade and all kinds of family relationships across the borders. These are still 5 different countries and 5 different markets in terms of communication and branding. So let's have a closer look at this market and the size of things and what we're looking at here. And of course the question you always have to carry in mind is, what is a market anyways? So we'll look at it in a few different angles. If you look at it in terms of number of mouths to feed, well, Sweden would be number 1, of course. It's the largest country by population and by area, with about 10 million people, whereas Denmark, Finland, Norway are between 5 and 6 million people in each country. Iceland has a rather small population, but it's still an interesting country, as we'll see. If we look at the total size of markets, that is how many dollars or euros are spent every year within the market, Sweden is the largest market, but you see that Norway is not too far behind considering its population. And that, of course, has to do with their economy being propelled by oil that is sourced directly from the rock bottom. Denmark is doing fairly well as well, as it is doing really well in trades. Finland also, quite a rich country. Iceland is a smaller economy, of course, so it's going to be a smaller volume there. So if we look at it another way then that is the money spent on food every year per capita, per person, we see a different situation. So we would see then Finland coming out as number 1, where you would have the most money spent per person on food every year, and Iceland just next to that. So the smallest market in the region actually has a really high per capita spend when it comes to food every year. But if you look at it in yet another way, look at it as food as a percent of spend, well then Finland and Denmark are the ones that seems to be spending least money on food in terms of the disposable income that all the household have. Iceland, Norway and Sweden are fairly similar and spend a bit more, which may indicate that there is a bit more interest for food in these countries, but the difference is not too big and you should not draw too many conclusions on that, but it's still a way of describing the market. So the interesting thing, of course, being Finland here at the bottom and at the other picture being at the top. Another way of looking at it, if you are looking at entering these markets, is what markets are actually in need of food, if you wish, and which ones have more food than they can eat. So Denmark produces more food than they can actually eat themselves, quite a bit more, whereas Sweden, Norway and Iceland are both heavily dependent on imports. Finland is somewhere in between, but still dependent on imports. This is not really to say that the Danish market is impossible to enter, but it will pose some challenges in some sectors, like pork or dairy, for example, where there are really strong Danish companies and they will, of course, defend their home market. If we look at the retail market as a whole in the Nordic region, we can see that Sweden covers about 1/3 of the market, a little bit more. Denmark, Finland and Norway covers about 20% each, and Iceland about 1%. The total value of the retail market in the Nordics is about 78 billion euros every year.